Nicholas Adley. Known to close friends simply as Nick, appeared to have it all. At 38, he was the CEO of Adley Innovations, a tech solutions company he had built from the ground up. With a net worth rumored to exceed $100 million, Nick's impeccable suits, stylish black Mercedes Maybach, and membership in exclusive golf clubs were only the most superficial trappings of his success. Beyond that veneer lay a fierce determination that had catapulted him from modest beginnings in a cramped one-bedroom apartment to the manicured lawns of the country's most prestigious gated communities. Nick's wife, Vivian Adley, was every bit his match in ambition and grace. Raised in a well-connected family in Washington, D.C., she had grown accustomed to polished events and the subtle power plays of high society. The two met at a charity gala in Manhattan, forging an instant connection over a shared love for strategic board games and classical music. Their courtship was a whirlwind that culminated in a lavish wedding at the Claridge Ballroom, where top executives, celebrities, and politicians gathered to celebrate what seemed like the definitive modern power couple. For years, Vivian had been the pillar behind Nick's unrelenting push to expand Adley Innovations. She worked tirelessly in the background, studying corporate law and even assisting the company with negotiations for its most significant deals. When Vivian discovered she was pregnant with their first child, the corporate world could not contain its excitement. Investors and employees saw her pregnancy as a sign of new beginnings, a symbol that even the unstoppable Nick Adley was settling into the notion of continuity and legacy. Yet behind her luminous smile, Vivian was troubled. Over the last 6 months, she had noticed subtle shifts in Nick's demeanor. He was often busy with late-night meetings, and his phone seemed surgically attached to him at all times. Once affectionate and eager to share his thoughts, Nick had grown distant. His once spontaneous weekend getaways with Vivian had dwindled to sporadic dinners in the city, more perfunctory than romantic. Even her mother, the ever-observant Elizabeth Townsend, had remarked that Nick looked distracted during family gatherings. "Are you taking care of yourself?" dear Elizabeth would ask Vivian, sipping her chamomile tea. Vivian would muster a polite smile and assure her mother everything was fine. She yearned to believe it herself. Nick, meanwhile, was grappling with a fierce conflict of conscience he never thought he'd face. The object of his torment was Lauren Reyes, a newcomer to Adley Innovations. Lauren, a stunning, sharp-witted woman in her late 20s, had been hired as a software architect, specializing in AI-driven analytics. She was introduced to Nick by his CFO, Marjorie Bennett, at an industry conference a year ago. From the moment they exchanged business cards, a quiet gravitational pull bound them. Nick tried to ignore it first out of loyalty to his wife, then out of an instinct for self-preservation. But each fleeting interaction with Lauren only intensified the undercurrent of attraction that threatened to unravel the life he had so carefully constructed. Lauren was neither naive nor predatory. She admired Nick's intellect and charm, but she also recognized the boundaries that a married man with an expecting wife should honor. For a time, she kept her distance. Yet in the confines of late-night strategy sessions and rushed dinners between coding sprints, small compliments turned into playful banter, and fleeting touches evolved into electrifying chemistry. By the time Nick found himself leaning in for that first forbidden kiss, he was far beyond the point of no return. The perfect life that Nick and Vivian had projected to the world was already cracking at the edges. Friends, family, and even the ever-watchful eyes of employees at Adley Innovations started to sense that something was amiss. But few would have guessed how explosive and far-reaching the fallout would be once truth and betrayal clashed in the high-stakes arena of corporate power. Months into his clandestine affair with Lauren Reyes, Nick discovered that juggling secrets at home and at work was far more challenging than any business deal he had ever orchestrated. The tension tightened like a vice around his throat each day. He grew paranoid about phone logs, cryptic text messages, and any inadvertent slip of the tongue that might reveal his double life. Despite his caution, guilt gnawed at him, especially when he saw Vivian's gentle hand resting protectively on her growing belly. Unknown to Nick, Vivian had begun to suspect something deeper was wrong. A late-night rummage through credit card statements revealed suspicious charges, a luxury flower bouquet from a top-tier florist nowhere near their home. Multiple dinners for two at upscale restaurants in parts of the city that Vivian had never visited, and most puzzlingly, a boutique hotel reservation made in Lauren's name. The final puzzle piece came from a concerned friend, Teresa Briggs, who worked in finance at Adley Innovations. Teresa mentioned in the gentlest way possible that she had overheard talk of Nick and Lauren traveling together for client meetings, suspiciously scheduled during weekends. Vivian felt her heart sink. Confronting Nick prematurely might drive him further into secrecy. Instead, she decided to consult with her family friend and legal advisor, Daniel Townsend. Together they formed a plan. Daniel suggested patience and precision, a thorough documentation of every suspicious transaction and phone record. If Vivian ever needed leverage, whether personal or corporate, she would have it at her fingertips. As Vivian's worry grew, Nick and Lauren slipped further into their questionable euphoria. Their dalliance felt exhilarating, cloaked in the thrill of stolen moments and hushed phone calls. Lauren, initially uneasy, allowed herself to get swept up. She rationalized that Nick was in a loveless marriage, or that he was only staying with Vivian because of the baby on the way, excuses to ease her conscience. In time, Nick's desire for Lauren expanded beyond the stolen hours in the office or secret dinner reservations. He booked a weekend getaway in the Caribbean under the guise of a business trip to meet potential investors. He convinced Marjorie Bennett to cover for him, reassuring her that it was a private matter and that everything would be handled discreetly. As the CFO, Marjorie prided herself on loyalty, but even she felt a slight twinge of discomfort. This was a personal indulgence, far from the realm of corporate necessity. Nevertheless, she told herself it was not her place to interfere. Despite the moral quagmire, the vacation shimmered with indulgence. Nick and Lauren found themselves on a secluded beach in Barbados, sipping Mai Tais and gazing at turquoise waves. Under the radiant sun, they shared whispered confidences about their pasts and bright fantasies of a future, an impossible future. But in that blissful moment, they believed it could be real. Lauren confessed her fear of being labeled a home wrecker, and Nick reassured her that he had never been happier, words that would later come back to haunt both of them. While Nick was feeding Lauren strawberries dipped in melted chocolate, Vivian quietly solidified her strategy back home. Each day, she met with Daniel Townsend, reviewing the corporate structure of Adley Innovations. Though Nick owned the majority of the shares, Vivian noticed certain intricacies in the bylaws, small but significant clauses that Daniel believed could be leveraged in her favor. Additionally, Vivian had done more than her fair share of behind-the-scenes work at Adley Innovations. She was no naive housewife. She possessed a legal mind that had contributed to the company's success. Daniel advised her that if she moved precisely at the right time, her position in the corporate hierarchy would not be easily dismissed even by Nick. But Vivian did not rush. She was, after all, heavily pregnant, and the well-being of her unborn child was paramount. Stress and anger had to be contained, channeled into carefully measured actions, instead of explosive confrontations. Nick returned from his idyllic jaunt with Lauren walking straight into the watchful gaze of Vivian. She greeted him at the door with soft eyes but an unreadable expression. Nick sensed an undercurrent of tension, though he found no immediate evidence of confrontation. He tried to appear cheerful to envelop her in a warm embrace, but her shoulders felt rigid beneath his hands. "How was your business trip?" she asked, her voice betraying none of her turmoil. "It was productive," Nick replied, forcing a smile. "Met some potential investors, but we'll see how it goes," she nodded, stepping aside to let him slip into the master bedroom, where he quickly stored away the suitcase that carried evidence of his deception, Lauren's perfume still lingering on the clothes inside. That night as they lay in bed, he pretended to sleep soundly while Vivian quietly placed a hand on her abdomen, wondering how much longer she could endure this facade without it tearing her apart. As Vivian's belly grew more prominent, her strength and resolve deepened. She confided in only a select few her mother, Elizabeth Townsend, her close friend, Teresa Briggs, and her lawyer, Daniel. Each served a distinct role. Elizabeth offered maternal support and reminded Vivian that dignity often meant biding one's time. Teresa, stationed within the corporate finance department, provided discreet updates on Nick's expenditures. Daniel guided her toward building a legally sound strategy that would protect both her and her unborn child's interests. Nick, unaware of Vivian's growing arsenal of information, believed he was skillfully navigating the precarious balance. He continued to meet Lauren in hush-hush rendezvous, booking penthouse suites or scheduling working lunches that extended into long afternoons. Any flicker of suspicion at the office was doused by Nick's reputation as a brilliant leader whose personal life had always seemed picture-perfect. A faint rumor here or there might crop up, but few dared to question the CEO to his face. Nevertheless, Nick sensed that Vivian was more guarded, her once lively eyes now veiled by caution. The subtle changes in her behavior, the locked drawers in her home office, her sudden interest in the organizational structure of Adley Innovations made him uneasy. When he asked her about it, she simply said, "I'm looking out for our future, Nick. I need to understand how everything works, especially with the baby coming." He accepted this explanation with a nod, though it left him with an underlying sense of worry. One day, a confrontation nearly erupted. Vivian, visibly exhausted from her pregnancy, asked Nick to drive her to a prenatal checkup. Nick hesitated. He had planned a lunch with Lauren at a new fusion restaurant downtown. As soon as Vivian saw the hesitation in his eyes, her suspicions roared to the surface. But rather than confronting him, she calmly said, "Never mind." Daniel offered to drive me. Nick blinked, confused and slightly relieved. He placed a quick kiss on her cheek and told her, "Take care. I'll see you later." The expression on Vivian's face as she turned away was as resolute as it was hurt. That evening, Vivian returned to the house, which felt more like a polished shell than a home. Nick was out again, an emergency client meeting, he had said. Alone, she prepared a simple dinner and painstakingly reviewed the documents Daniel had sent over. They detailed key clauses in Adley Innovations' corporate governance guidelines. One clause in particular caught her eye. In the event the CEO is deemed unfit to continue in his role, the board shall appoint the next most qualified senior executive or stakeholder with proven corporate and legal expertise to assume interim leadership. Vivian's involvement in the company's legal architecture meant she had a legitimate stake. If Nick were found unfit, she could claim interim leadership. The question was, how to prove Nick's unfitness without incurring legal or moral backlash. Meanwhile, Nick's world was slowly fracturing. Juggling a mistress and a pregnant wife demanded a level of emotional compartmentalization he wasn't prepared for. His neglected emails piled up and missed deadlines began to irritate the senior management team. Harrison Kim, the company's COO, and an old friend of Nick's privately chastised him for not reviewing key proposals on time. Marjorie Bennett, while still supportive, warned that discontent among shareholders could spike if Nick's performance didn't stabilize. Nick's emotional high with Lauren was tinged with anxieties about corporate unrest and spousal suspicion. In one particularly vulnerable moment, he confided in Lauren about his fears. "What if Vivian finds out about us?" he murmured, worry etched into his face. Lauren's eyes darted away, her fingers twisting a napkin. "We have to be cautious," she replied. "I never wanted to come between you and your wife, but we've come this far." The conversation was left incomplete, suspended in a cloud of unspoken dread. Nick offered to whisk Lauren away again this time to a lavish resort in the Maldives for a well-deserved break. She agreed, albeit anxiously. They made plans for the following month, ignoring the ticking time bomb that was Vivian's pregnancy, the corporate demands, and the swirl of rumors that refused to vanish. While Nick and Lauren plotted another escapade, Vivian and Daniel Townsend finalized a plan that could shift the entire balance of power within Adley Innovations. After double-checking relevant bylaws and aligning with certain sympathetic board members, Vivian had an ace up her sleeve, a formal petition to the board of directors, citing Nick's erratic behavior and potential financial improprieties as grounds for a temporary removal from his role as CEO. It was risky Vivian needed to ensure that the petition didn't appear as a spiteful move from a jealous wife. But if she could present it as an act to safeguard the company, especially when the CEO was compromised by personal issues, she might just pull it off. Thus the lines of battle were quietly drawn. The pregnant wife on one side, steeling her heart against the betrayal she felt, armed with legal strategies and a mother's determination to protect her child's future. On the other side, the millionaire husband, oblivious to the storm brewing at home, intoxicated by his mistress's allure, and convinced he was still in control. The inevitability of discovery finally struck when Nick's carefully woven facade began to unravel thread by thread. It started with a small oversight. One afternoon, in a rush to clear his texts, before Vivian glanced at his phone, Nick accidentally forwarded an email chain including flirty messages exchanged between him and Lauren to Vivian's secondary email address. In it, Lauren teased him about their upcoming Maldives trip, joking that they should stay an extra week and forget the rest of the world exists. Vivian's heart pounded as she read the message. The half-formed suspicions, the credit card statements, and the hushed warnings from friends, all crystallized into one stinging reality. Nick was planning yet another exotic vacation with Lauren, leaving Vivian behind, pregnant to handle the house, the company's future, and her own heartbreak. She called Daniel Townsend immediately. "Daniel." "It's happening," she murmured into the phone, her voice quivering. "I have the proof." Daniel, ever cool-headed, responded. "This might actually strengthen our case. It shows a pattern of negligence and impropriety." "But Vivian, are you emotionally ready to go through with this once we start the legal process? There's no turning back." Vivian closed her eyes, tears threatening to spill over. "I have no choice. He left me with none." The confrontation came later that night. Instead of her usual stoic silence, Vivian decided to confront Nick directly. Armed with the incriminating email, she waited for him in the living room, lights dim, the tension palpable. When Nick returned home, he froze at the sight of her icy stare. "Vivian." He began removing his coat. "What's going on?" "Going on," she repeated in a tone he had never heard from her before. "I believe you can tell me. Perhaps you'd like to share your excitement for your upcoming trip to the Maldives with Lauren Reyes." Nick's face paled. His mind spun in search of plausible deniability, but the set of Vivian's jaw told him that the ruse was up. For a moment he thought of lying, claiming it was a business trip, but the expression on her face told him it would be futile. "Vivian, I'm sorry," he managed, voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. It didn't mean anything." Vivian let out a bitter laugh. "It didn't mean anything? Are you hearing yourself? Nick, you've been lying to me for months, spending fortunes on vacations and neglecting your duties at the company we built together. You've left me here pregnant with your child to chase after some fantasy." Nick tried to approach her, but she stepped back. The space between them felt like an abyss. "Let's talk about this calmly, please," he pleaded. "We can figure something out." "I still love you, Vivian." She shook her head. "Your words mean nothing to me anymore. I deserve better. Our child deserves better." The conversation that followed was more of a one-sided torrent of hurt and betrayal than a dialogue. Nick attempted half-hearted explanations, citing stress and confusion, but none of it alleviated the blow. By the time Vivian stormed into the bedroom, locking the door behind her, Nick stood in the hallway, stunned and defeated. But the night's revelations did not end there. Vivian, her tears spent, opened her laptop and forwarded the incriminating email chain to Daniel Townsend and a select group of board members she trusted. The message was concise. "My husband, the CEO, is currently compromised. He has neglected his responsibilities and misused company resources for personal affairs. For the sake of Adley Innovations, immediate action may be required." Across town, in the quiet glow of a lamp, Daniel opened Vivian's email, let out a heavy sigh, and began drafting the legal documents that would catalyze the next phase of this corporate and marital war. In that single evening, the secrets Nick had worked so hard to bury were laid bare, not just to Vivian, but to influential players within the company. His image as an astute, focused leader was about to take a devastating hit, and he had no inkling of how swiftly his carefully constructed empire would come crashing down. The board of directors at Adley Innovations was convened in an emergency session rarely seen in the company's history. Invitations went out at dawn with the curt explanation, "Urgent matters concerning CEO's conduct." Most members arrived with a mix of curiosity, annoyance, and concern. Harrison Kim, the COO, was the first to appear, bracing himself for what might be a catastrophic confrontation. Marjorie Bennett, the CFO, looked visibly anxious. Her usual composed demeanor rattled. Nick strode in, wearing a tailored navy suit and a forced air of confidence. His eyes darted around, searching for signs of who might be his ally and who had turned foe. Normally, he'd walk into a board meeting with swagger, calmly greeting everyone. This time he offered only curt nods, sweat gathering at his temples. The weight of the preceding night's confrontation with Vivian hung heavily in the room. Across the table sat Vivian, accompanied by Daniel Townsend. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit that highlighted her advanced pregnancy. The board members, many of whom had known her for years, watched in silent sympathy. Tension crackled in the air. The meeting commenced with the chair, a silver-haired gentleman named Sebastian Wu, clearing his throat. "We're here today to address serious allegations concerning the professional conduct of our CEO, Nicholas Adley. We have been presented with evidence suggesting misuse of company funds, neglect of duties, and other improprieties that could potentially harm Adley Innovations' future. Nick opened his mouth to protest, but Sebastian held up a hand. "We will hear from both sides, Mr. Adley." "You may speak after Mrs. Adley presents her case." Vivian stood, leaning slightly on the table for support. She took a measured breath before speaking. "I want to clarify that I am here today not as Nicholas Adley's wife, but as a substantial shareholder and legal contributor to Adley Innovations. Over the past several months, I have become increasingly concerned about Nick's behavior. He has neglected critical deadlines, diverted funds for personal use, including lavish vacations under the guise of client meetings, and compromised the stability of the company." She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to settle. "I have also noted a pattern of erratic decision-making, which raises the question of whether he can continue to lead Adley Innovations effectively. This isn't a personal vendetta. It's about the company's best interests. We are on the cusp of major expansions, and I fear Nick's actions could jeopardize everything we've built." Nick's face burned red. "You have no right," he began. "She has every right," Daniel Townsend interrupted. "Under the corporate bylaws, any significant shareholder who believes the CEO is acting to the detriment of the company may request a formal review by the board. We have provided documents that detail questionable expenses and missed obligations. We also have evidence of continued deception in business reporting." Some of the board members shifted uncomfortably, recalling the odd discrepancies in the financial statements that had been brushed aside when Nick offered vague explanations. Marjorie Bennett looked down at her clasped hands, recalling the times Nick had asked her to mask personal expenses as research and development. She felt the knot of guilt tighten in her chest. Nick finally seized the chance to speak. "This is absurd. Every company has corporate retreats and client entertainment budgets. Yes, I might have used them in ways that appear questionable, but I assure you it was for the benefit of forging important relationships. The personal aspect of my trip is my private matter, and it does not concern the board." Sebastian Wu frowned. "Nick, the personal aspect becomes relevant if you used company funds or time allocated for official duties. This is about the fiduciary responsibility you hold as CEO. If these allegations prove accurate, they point to a serious breach." Nick stammered, I have never once shirked my responsibilities to this company. My vision and leadership brought Adley Innovations to where it is today. This entire meeting is a smear campaign orchestrated by my wife, who is understandably emotional." Vivian's eyes flickered with anger. "Emotional? Yes, I'm angry. Betrayed, but also pragmatic. I won't let your personal choices cripple our child's future, or the futures of all the employees who count on Adley Innovations for their livelihoods." A hushed murmur rippled across the room. In that moment, Vivian's composure and clarity outshone Nick's defensive bluster. The board members exchanged looks, each weighing the facts. Eventually, Harrison Kim cleared his throat. "Nick, I've known you for years. You're a brilliant man, but I can't pretend I haven't noticed issues these past few months. The missed proposals, the late product rollouts, these are not normal. We need some accountability here." Sebastian Wu nodded solemnly and turned to the board. "Motion to temporarily suspend Nicholas Adley as CEO, pending further investigation, and to appoint an interim CEO chosen by this board." A hush fell, followed by a flurry of exchanged glances. Slowly, hands rose in favor of the motion. Nick watched horror etched on his face as one by one board members, including former supporters, voted for his suspension. In a matter of minutes, Nick's iron grip on the company loosened, replaced by the unstoppable momentum of corporate due process. Sebastian nodded, eyes heavy with regret. The motion passes. Nicholas Adley is hereby suspended pending investigation. We will reconvene to determine the leadership structure. Meeting adjourned. Nick rose from his seat, fury contorting his features. He aimed a blistering glare at Vivian. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think you can run this company without me? It'll fall apart before your eyes." Vivian kept her gaze steady, even as her heart pounded. "I suppose we'll see," she replied softly, resolute in the knowledge that there was no turning back. The aftermath of the board's decision was immediate and seismic. Word spread through the hallways of Adley Innovations like a brush fire. Nicholas Adley, the company's larger-than-life founder, had been suspended. Employees whispered in corners, exchanging rumors and half-truths. Some couldn't believe that the man who had once inspired them with tales of visionary growth and innovative breakthroughs was suddenly on the brink of corporate exile. Vivian found herself the reluctant center of attention. In the days following the suspension, Sebastian Wu temporarily took on executive duties, but there was an unmistakable momentum behind making Vivian interim CEO. She had an undeniable advantage: her background in corporate law, her intimate knowledge of the company's history, and a sincerity that resonated in every conversation. Despite Nick's accusations that she was emotionally driven, Vivian demonstrated a calm and calculated approach. Still, the transition was not smooth. On her first day, stepping into Nick's old office, a sprawling corner space lined with awards plaques and a panoramic view of the city, she felt a pang of nostalgia. She remembered the early days when she and Nick would stay up late, brainstorming strategies for acquiring venture capital or wooing key clients. It all felt like a lifetime ago. Now she was here under circumstances she'd never imagined, protecting the very institution they had built together from Nick's own recklessness. Harrison Kim offered a courteous handshake, his expression sympathetic. "This isn't how I envisioned our leadership structure evolving," he admitted. "But I want you to know you have my full support." Marjorie Bennett was more reserved. Guilt still gnawed at her for having abetted some of Nick's questionable expenditures. Yet she approached Vivian's desk with a portfolio of financial data. "I know the ropes, and I know where the skeletons are buried," she said softly. "Let me help you clean this up." Vivian nodded, grateful for the olive branch. "It's going to take all of us working together. I'm not here to punish or humiliate Nick's allies. I'm just here to stabilize the company." With that, the frenetic pace of corporate life took hold. Vivian dived into marathon meetings, investor calls, and briefing sessions on critical projects. One of Adley Innovations' most significant ventures, a joint AI research initiative with the government, had been stalled due to Nick's inattention. Vivian made it her priority to get it back on track, meeting with project managers and forging a new sense of collaboration. As Vivian rose to the occasion, Nick spiraled downward. Stripped of his CEO title, he was forced to vacate his office. In desperation, he attempted to curry favor with board members, insisting the allegations against him were overblown. But as more evidence surfaced, expense reports for 5-star resorts under client entertainment, suspicious cash withdrawals, and personal flights booked with the corporate jet, his pleas fell on increasingly deaf ears. Lauren Reyes also felt the tremors of Nick's downfall. With rumors swirling, she found herself ostracized by colleagues who had once admired her technical prowess. She received a stern memo from Human Resources, reminding her of the company's policy against unethical conduct. Though she was not officially fired, her position grew tenuous, and she spent more time avoiding watchful gazes than doing meaningful work. Meanwhile, Vivian pressed on, spurred by a mix of ambition and necessity. The guilt and sorrow she felt over her marriage's collapse did not vanish, but she compartmentalized it to fulfill her new role. Late at night, when the lights were off and she was alone in the CEO's office, she sometimes found herself pressing a hand against her pregnant belly, whispering, "Stay strong for me, baby. We're almost there." Under Vivian's guidance, the climate at Adley Innovations started to shift. There was a renewed sense of discipline, a clearer allocation of budgets, and a more transparent reporting structure. Investors, initially spooked by Nick's suspension, began to warm to Vivian's leadership after a successful quarter-end review showed stable, if not improved, financials. Yet not everyone was content. A faction within the company and among the shareholders felt loyal to Nick and questioned Vivian's ability to lead long-term. They called for a thorough external audit, wanting to ensure no biases existed in the evidence that led to Nick's suspension. Vivian, confident in her position, welcomed the audit. "Let the truth come to light," she said. "That's the only way we can move forward." Truth, however, has a way of exposing more than one bargains for. While Vivian was busy charting the company's course, Nick was plotting a comeback, one that would push this drama into an even more precarious territory. Nick paced the living room of the penthouse he had rented after leaving the marital home. He had been forced to move out when tensions with Vivian hit a fever pitch. The swanky decor, the glass coffee table, the plush white rug, and the modern art on the walls brought him little comfort. Furious and humiliated, he downed glass after glass of whiskey, seething over the betrayal he felt from his wife and the board members who had once admired him. Lauren tried to comfort him, but her presence felt like a reminder of the scandal. "Maybe we should lay low," she suggested one evening, inching closer to him on the couch. "Give the company time to settle." Nick snorted. "Lay low. Why should I? This was my company, my vision, and Vivian thinks she can just waltz in and claim it over my dead body." Lauren shrank back, sensing the anger radiating off him. She knew that part of Nick blamed her for his downfall, even if he wouldn't say it outright. Their once rosy affair had transformed into a toxic dance of finger-pointing and desperation. That night, Nick dialed the number of a high-profile attorney named Zachary Klein. Known in certain circles for representing CEOs in messy corporate disputes, Klein was a bulldog who relished a good fight. After explaining his predicament, Nick listened silent and grim as Klein laid out a plan. "We need to discredit Vivian's evidence," Klein said. "Prove it was gathered illegally or that she manipulated it for personal gain. If we can show that she used her position and resources in an unethical manner, we can cast reasonable doubt on the board's decision." Nick's eyes gleamed. "So there's a path to reinstatement." "It's not guaranteed," Klein cautioned. "But I've seen weaker cases get Kers reinstated. It all depends on how much dirt we can dig up on Vivian." Over the next few weeks, Nick and Klein worked tirelessly to compile any information that could taint Vivian's reputation. They rummaged through her personal history, her academic records, even her charitable affiliations. Nick also tried to exploit Vivian's friendship with Daniel Townsend, alleging that he manipulated the board under the guise of legal counsel. He fabricated a storyline that Vivian and Daniel had conspired to steal the company out from under him in an orchestrated coup. Simultaneously, Nick began contacting select board members who had expressed lingering loyalty. He dangled the promise of new investment deals, claiming he had lined up powerful partners overseas who were interested in injecting capital into Adley Innovations if and only if Nick was restored to his rightful position as CEO. The lure of potential profits and the nostalgia for the dynamic leadership Nick once offered began to sway a handful of directors. While Nick orchestrated his counterattack, Vivian was oblivious to the full extent of his schemes. She was consumed by the daily demands of her new role, from stabilizing the product pipeline to reassuring nervous employees. One morning, she woke to find multiple articles popping up in business tabloids with sensational headlines. Adley Innovations in turmoil. Was the CEO ousted in a corporate coup and the pregnant wife's power grab? Inside the boardroom, drama. Vivian's phone buzzed incessantly. Marjorie called, her voice shaky. "These rumors, are they true? Are you and Daniel Townsend more than just old friends and a lawyer-client relationship?" Vivian's face burned with indignation. "Absolutely not. This is Nick's doing. He's trying to paint me as a manipulator." A sense of foreboding gripped her. She realized that Nick would not relinquish control without a fierce fight. She shared her concerns with Daniel, who advised her to remain transparent. "If he's attacking your credibility, we respond with authenticity. Keep a clear paper trail. Let the audit proceed. The facts are on our side, not his." But Daniel's confidence did little to soothe Vivian's nerves. She was now juggling the responsibilities of an interim CEO, a mother-to-be just weeks away from delivery, and a target of scurrilous rumors designed to undermine her leadership. Each day, as she walked the corridors of Adley Innovations, she saw uncertain faces, staff members who wondered if the company's turmoil would jeopardize their jobs. Nick's plan, meanwhile, was gathering momentum. He managed to meet discreetly with the audit committee, hinting that if they discovered certain irregularities in Vivian's tenure or in Daniel Townsend's legal approach, Nick would reward them handsomely once he was back in charge. The lines between corruption and legitimate business strategy blurred in Nick's desperation to reclaim his power. The stage was set for a final showdown that would not only determine the future of Adley Innovations, but also test the limits of Vivian's resolve, Nick's cunning, and just how far karma could stretch before snapping back with a vengeance. In the midst of the media frenzy and boardroom politics, Vivian found a surprising source of support in Marjorie Bennett, the CFO, who had once facilitated Nick's questionable financial requests. Stung by guilt and tired of the toxic atmosphere, Marjorie decided to come clean. She requested a private meeting with Vivian late one afternoon, slipping into the CEO's office with a file tucked under her arm. "I'm not proud of what I've done," Marjorie began, eyes downcast. "There were times Nick asked me to fudge expense reports or authorize extravagant spending in the name of client relations. I never felt comfortable with it, but I didn't question him. He was the CEO, and I wanted to keep my job." Vivian inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I appreciate your honesty. It must not have been easy." Marjorie opened the file, revealing a trove of documents. "These are backups, transfers, receipts, and emails that prove Nick knew exactly what he was doing. He can't claim ignorance or blame others. If an independent audit sees this, it will confirm how he systematically misused company resources for his personal agenda." Vivian eyed the incriminating evidence. "This is exactly what we need to counter Nick's smear campaign. He's already trying to discredit me, but these documents show a pattern of misconduct on his part." Marjorie's eyes brimmed with tears. "I only hope this can help Adley Innovations survive this chaos. I love this company. I've been here from the early days. I don't want to see it crumble under Nick's reckless ambition." Moved. Vivian reassured her. "I'm grateful you've come forward, Marjorie. This goes a long way in setting things right. Let's keep these documents safe. The auditors will be here next week, and we'll show them everything." Word of Marjorie's confession soon reached Nick, who erupted in fury upon learning of her betrayal. That ungrateful CFO, he raged to Lauren, his hands clenching into fists. I gave her a position of power, and this is how she repays me. Lauren tried to calm him. We can't control what she does. Maybe we can discredit her. Say she's only trying to save her own skin. Nick shook his head, exasperated. I don't know if that will be enough. Vivian and Marjorie together hold all the cards now. I might need to leave the country for a while until this blows over. Lauren's face fell. Leave the country? Are you serious? Just until I figure out a better strategy, Nick snapped. I won't go down without a fight. But if the audit committee sides with Vivian, I might face serious legal consequences. Lauren realized that Nick's desperation had grown too toxic, and she worried about her own career and reputation, which were already in tatters. Her eyes darted to the door as if seeking an escape from the suffocating tension. Meanwhile, as Vivian readied for the audit, she received an unexpected phone call from Harrison Kim. Listen, Harrison said, I've been quietly gathering support among some major shareholders. They see how hard you've been working, and they appreciate the stability you're bringing. Once the audit confirms your findings, they're prepared to vote you in as permanent CEO. Vivian's breath caught. Permanent CEO, she echoed, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. The thought of leading Adley Innovations on a permanent basis had never been her ambition, but fate had thrust this path upon her. I'm honored, Harrison. Let's make sure we do this by the book. I don't want any more backroom deals or manipulations. This company deserves better. In the days leading up to the auditor's arrival, Vivian spent countless hours reviewing documentation, preparing statements, and meeting with department heads. She wanted to ensure every corner of Adley Innovations was ready for scrutiny. Daniel Townsend coordinated with outside counsel, ensuring a fair and transparent process. Finally, the audit team. A well-respected firm, led by a stern yet fair-minded woman named Patricia Cook, arrived. Over the course of several days, they pored over emails, financial statements, and testimonies from key employees. Tension reigned in every corridor, but Vivian maintained her composure, guiding the auditors openly and answering their questions honestly. Nick tried to intercept the auditors, demanding that they review damning evidence against Vivian. Yet his evidence proved shaky, mostly hearsay, and personal emails taken out of context. When pressed for more concrete proof, Nick resorted to emotional tirades, further alienating himself from those he sought to persuade. As the audit neared its conclusion, a quiet hush settled over Adley Innovations. Employees felt the collective weight of the potential outcome. One verdict could either cement Vivian's leadership and exonerate her from Nick's accusations, or cast doubt on her legitimacy and open the door for Nick's return. Karma, it seemed, was finally poised to deliver its blow. Everything hung in the balance, awaiting Patricia Cook's final report. And in the background, Vivian braced herself, not just for the future of the company, but for the imminent birth of her child, adding yet another layer of poignancy to this already gripping real-life drama. Patricia Cook concluded the company-wide audit with a meticulous presentation in the same glass-walled boardroom that had witnessed Nick's suspension. The atmosphere was electric. Board members, department heads, and major shareholders gathered their expressions a collective study in anticipation. Patricia began by praising Adley Innovations for its generally robust financial structure and innovative product lines. A note of optimism infused the air. But then she cleared her throat, flipping to the next page of her report. However, she continued, our investigation, also uncovered significant misuse of company funds, circumvention of expense protocols, and evidence of an inappropriate personal relationship that interfered with corporate decision-making at the highest level. All eyes fell on Nick, who sat stiffly in the back row, face pale. Patricia ticked through the specifics: inflated travel expenses for exotic resorts, suspicious consulting fees disbursed to accounts linked to Lauren Reyes, and personal charges disguised under vague categories like market research. The final dagger came when Patricia revealed internal communications showing Nick had pressured Marjorie Bennett to misreport certain financials to keep the board in the dark. As a result, Patricia concluded we find that Nicholas Adley, in his capacity as CEO, compromised the company's integrity. These are serious breaches. Our recommendation is that Mr. Adley's suspension be made permanent, and he be barred from resuming any executive role within Adley Innovations. A tense murmur rippled through the room. Some of Nick's old allies clenched their fists. Others exhaled in relief. Harrison Kim stood to formally propose a board resolution to finalize the removal of Nicholas Adley from the CEO position and appoint Vivian Adley as permanent CEO. The resolution passed by an overwhelming majority. Nick slumped in his seat, fury and disbelief battling in his eyes. Yet karma was not done. Moments after the resolution, 2 officials from the city's finance regulatory body stepped into the boardroom. Patricia had forwarded her audit findings to the regulatory authorities, citing potential violations of corporate governance and financial fraud statutes. The officials presented Nick with a notice to appear for an official inquiry, a step that could lead to civil penalties or even criminal charges. Nick's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but his words faltered. The room stood silent, except for the clicking of the officials' pens against their clipboards. Vivienne, who had watched the proceedings with calm determination, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her sympathized with the man she had once loved, who now looked like a trapped animal. But a sharper, cooler part of her recognized that justice was being served. Nick had made choices that threatened not just their marriage, but the livelihoods of hundreds of employees. This was the cost of his hubris. With adrenaline still coursing through her veins, Vivian rose and walked over to Nick. She offered a civil nod, ignoring the outraged glare he threw her way. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," she murmured. "But you left me no choice." Nick spat out a bitter laugh. "You think you've won? Just wait. This isn't over," he snarled. But the empty bravado in his voice betrayed a broken man. Security personnel stepped forward politely, urging Nick to leave. Lauren Reyes, who had been hovering near the doorway, quickly gathered her things and followed him out, her face etched with regret. In the hallway, Nick burst into a tirade against Lauren. "You brought me nothing but trouble," he hissed, ignoring her attempts to console him. The weight of his misdeeds and the looming inquiry pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. Meanwhile, within the boardroom, Vivian was met with a round of subdued yet heartfelt applause. She had emerged victorious in a battle she never asked for, but was forced to fight. Over the next week, news outlets ran headline after headline detailing Nick's downfall, the Mistress scandal, and the triumphant rise of the pregnant wife who wrested control of the empire. Ironically, the same media that had once championed Nick as a self-made genius now labeled him a cautionary tale of unchecked ego and betrayal. Hard karma had indeed struck, and Nick felt its full impact. His accounts were frozen pending investigation. Potential investors distanced themselves from him like a contagious virus. Even his loyal aides scattered to protect their own reputations. In the span of a few months, Nick went from being the envy of the corporate world to a pariah staring down legal battles and potential financial ruin. Vivian, however, pressed forward, determined to salvage the future of Adley Innovations and the child she was soon to bring into the world. The board's trust in her leadership soared as she navigated the storm with grace and resolve. While she carried the weight of heartbreak, betrayal, and late-term pregnancy, she also carried the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build something lasting and honorable on the ruins Nick had left behind. In the months that followed, Adley Innovations began a renaissance under Vivian's measured leadership. She restructured the management hierarchy, promoting rising talents who had been stifled under Nick's domineering style. Harrison Kim's operational expertise shone in new cross-department collaborations, and Marjorie Bennett worked tirelessly to rebuild the company's financial integrity. Together, they forged a culture of transparency and ethical conduct, a stark contrast to the secretive climate that had once ruled. Meanwhile, Nick faced a prolonged legal ordeal. Zachary Klein, his high-powered attorney, did everything within his capability to keep Nick out of jail, negotiating settlements and appearing in multiple hearings. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Nick's credibility was in tatters. He managed to avoid prison time thanks to a plea deal, but at a hefty cost, staggering financial penalties that depleted much of his remaining wealth, and a lifelong ban from holding any officer or director position in a publicly traded company. With Nick out of the picture, Lauren Reyes attempted to reinvent herself. She left Adley Innovations, resigning quietly before the board could terminate her. Rumors suggested she moved abroad, hoping to escape the scandal and start anew. No one at Adley Innovations had heard from her since, and few expressed interest in tracking her down. Her name became a footnote in the company's complicated history. For Vivian, the journey was far from over. Just a few days after Nick's legal battles concluded, she went into labor. A hush of anticipation gripped the staff at Adley Innovations when they heard the news that their newly appointed CEO was rushed to the hospital. Messages of support and excitement lit up the internal communication channels. The birth was not without complications, compounded by the stress that had shadowed her entire pregnancy. Yet after several tense hours, Vivian delivered a healthy baby boy. Holding her son for the first time, she felt a swirl of gratitude and relief. The child represented a turning point, a promise that life could be regenerated, even when so much had been torn apart. Elizabeth Townsend. Her mother and Daniel Townsend stood by her side in the hospital, sharing in her tears of joy. Over the next few weeks, Vivian embraced the delicate balancing act of motherhood and corporate leadership. Though she cherished every moment with her newborn, she also felt responsible for the hundreds of employees counting on her to keep Adley Innovations stable. Fortunately, with Harrison and Marjorie acting as her hands-on deputies, she could step back just enough to spend precious time with her child. In the months that followed, Adley Innovations made headlines once more, but this time for positive reasons. The company's AI research venture secured major government funding, and the new strategic alliances Vivian fostered began to bear fruit. Share prices rebounded. Magazines that once gossiped about scandal now ran profiles praising Vivian's resilience and vision. Some even dubbed her the phoenix of the tech world, rising from the ashes of Nick's downfall. As for Nick, he receded from the public eye. He settled in a quieter part of the country, rumored to be spending his days writing a memoir or dabbling in small-scale consulting gigs that didn't violate his ban. Whatever bravado he once had was stripped away. Whenever the media caught a glimpse of him, he looked subdued, haunted by regrets. And so the final chapter of this real-life drama closed not in cataclysm, but in renewal. The millionaire who had flaunted his mistress on glitzy vacations lost everything to his own hubris. His pregnant wife, underestimated and betrayed, stepped in to lead and protect their shared legacy. Though the scars remained memories of betrayal, heartbreak, and moral compromise, the seeds of a brighter future had been planted. Vivian often reflected on the improbable journey that had taken her from a supportive spouse in the background to a commanding figure at the head of a tech empire. While her marriage was in ruins, a new life had emerged both in the form of her child and a revitalized company ethos. In that sense, her story was not merely one of retribution, but of transcendence, a testament to the power of inner strength when faced with the darkest storms. The dramatic saga of Nick Adley's downfall and Vivian Adley's rise as the new leader of Adley Innovations proves that life's most punishing lessons often pave the way for remarkable transformations. As lies unraveled and hidden motives erupted into the public eye, it took grit, determination, and a fierce devotion to truth for Vivian to protect her unborn child and the company she helped build. The twists and betrayals capped by the ultimate stroke of karma remind us that power can vanish in an instant when misused, while resilience in the face of adversity can propel us to even greater heights. Lightning cracked across the charcoal sky the night Amelia found herself trembling behind the wheel of an aging sedan, a single suitcase tossed haphazardly in the back seat. She was 5 months pregnant, carrying the child of a man she once believed to be her soulmate. Yet Ethan Harrington, the revered millionaire who built his empire from the ground up, had locked her out of the only home she had ever known. Why? So he could parade a diamond-draped mistress in front of the entire world. Fate had seemingly abandoned Amelia, or so she thought. For in the shadows lay a single letter destined to unravel everything and force destiny's final reckoning. Amelia Johnson first met Ethan Harrington in a quiet corner of Manhattan where dreams soared as high as the skyscrapers and heartbreak lurked in every alleyway. She was 22 at the time, a recent graduate from a small liberal arts college in upstate New York, armed with a degree in literature that her parents once worried might never pay the bills. Nevertheless, Amelia had a heart brimming with optimism and a mind teeming with stories waiting to be told. Ethan, older by a decade, was already something of a legend in local business circles. He had a gift for seeing hidden potential, whether in failing companies or in an introverted girl quietly sipping espresso in a crowded cafe. At the time, his successes included a lucrative tech startup he'd sold for millions. Rumor had it, he was set on building a new conglomerate, an empire that spanned real estate, fashion, and digital media. The day they met, Amelia was sitting in a narrow booth at Bellamy's coffee shop, her laptop open, attempting to finish a short story for a modest online publication. She never intended to catch anyone's attention, especially not that of Ethan Harrington, who was rumored to have the arrogance of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Yet to her surprise, he asked if he could join her. That chance conversation sparked something that would eventually grow into a raging inferno, a consuming love that Amelia believed was her fairy tale. From the outside, they looked like a mismatched pair, Amelia the quiet girl with honey-brown hair and wide, curious eyes hunched over her laptop. Ethan the confident entrepreneur who strolled around like he owned the city. But from that very first meeting, there was a tenderness in Ethan's voice that melted Amelia's defenses. He spoke passionately about ideas, his desire to transform the old neighborhoods of Brooklyn into something modern, yet preserving the soul of the city. She in turn told him about her writing her dreams of penning a novel that would one day grace bookstore windows. It didn't take long for him to sweep her off her feet. Expensive dinners at high-rise restaurants, strolls along the Hudson River, and stolen kisses under neon streetlights made every moment feel as if they were the only two people in Manhattan. Friends thought they were moving fast, but Amelia felt for the first time that she was truly living. And in Ethan she saw both a fierce intellect and a complicated soul. She admired how he possessed an uncanny ability to seal million-dollar deals by day, then listen intently to her short story drafts by night. There was an unspoken promise in every gentle touch, one of forever. Her parents, George and Laura Johnson, worried that a man of Ethan's stature might break Amelia's heart. "He's built a kingdom," her mother often said, "and men who build kingdoms sometimes act like kings." But Amelia dismissed those concerns. She saw only the man who doted on her, who funded her creative writing workshops, without her even asking, who recommended her to some of his publishing contacts. He claimed to believe in her talent more than she believed in it herself. They married in a lavish ceremony at the Harrington estate in the Hamptons. Pictures splashed across society columns. The tech mogul weds. The budding writer. 1,000 white orchids framed the altar, and Amelia's ivory train swept across the polished marble. That day her heart fluttered with undiluted hope, convinced that the euphoria of their union would never fade. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Their married life began in an opulent penthouse overlooking Central Park. Morning sunshine spilled in through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting their living room in a warm golden glow. At first, Amelia's days were filled with creative inspiration. She had a dedicated writing alcove designed by Ethan himself, complete with custom-built bookshelves and a vintage reading lamp that once belonged to a famous editor. Meanwhile, Ethan spent his days strategizing how to expand his empire. Despite the hustle, he never failed to remind Amelia of how much he loved her. There were surprise breakfasts in bed, diamond bracelets left on her writing desk, and spontaneous getaways to tropical islands when he concluded major deals. When they visited the Harrington family's old countryside estate, Ethan's father, Christopher Harrington, made it clear that he too was glad Ethan had finally found someone with a kind heart. However, as months turned to years, subtle changes began creeping in. Ethan's business expansions demanded longer hours. He started jetting off more frequently, traveling to Singapore, London, Dubai, seemingly every major financial hub. His phone buzzed incessantly, even late at night, and Amelia often fell asleep alone, the blankets on his side untouched. She grew accustomed to waking up to hurried goodbyes and stiff business suits. At first, Amelia consoled herself that this was the price of success, that every entrepreneur's spouse navigated this tension. She reminded herself of her own busy schedule whenever she was deep in her writing. Yet there was an ache she couldn't define. The connection she cherished, the stolen moments in coffee shops, the gentle discussions of art and life, had begun to fade. She realized they rarely had time to just sit in the same room and talk. Ethan, for his part, seemed stressed. Yes, he was building unstoppable momentum in business circles, but it came with a sharper edge. His staff whispered about him becoming a merciless negotiator, a man who would crush smaller competitors without a second thought. At times, Amelia glimpsed a colder side of him, a steely determination that excluded warmth. She tried to talk to him about it, especially on nights when he slumped into bed, looking defeated. But he'd wave off her concerns with a curt, "I'm fine, just tired." It was during this period of subtle distance that Amelia learned she was pregnant. After 3 years of marriage, the news was exhilarating for her. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother. Nervous and excited, she prepared a small celebration in their penthouse. She cooked Ethan's favorite meal, spaghetti carbonara with extra parmesan, and left the pregnancy test on the table as a surprise. Yet when Ethan arrived home past midnight, the dinner was cold and Amelia was dozing on the couch. He barely glanced at the test before giving her a distracted peck on the forehead. "That's great, sweetheart. We'll talk about it tomorrow," he muttered. Then he trudged off to their bedroom, leaving Amelia by the flickering candles, heartbreak simmering beneath her chest. The next morning, Ethan apologized for his indifference. "I'm sorry I was exhausted. Of course I'm happy we've always wanted a child." He kissed her cheek. "You have to understand, I'm in the middle of the biggest deal of my life. A child is wonderful news, but we need to approach it carefully. Let me focus on securing the next round of funding, and we'll think about all the baby details soon." Amelia forced a bright smile, reassuring him that she understood. But in truth, anxiety coiled inside her. She feared that the child would be an afterthought in a life consumed by business ventures. Yet she clung to hope. Perhaps once the baby arrived, it would reinvigorate their bond. Maybe Ethan would see that there was more to life than deals and expansions, and so she carried on, quietly nurturing new life within her, trusting that the marriage she had believed unbreakable would remain so. Little did she know the stage was already set for a new figure to enter Ethan's world, someone who would challenge everything Amelia held dear. The first time Amelia heard the name Bianca Rossi was from one of Ethan's junior associates, Michael Thompson. Michael was an earnest man who'd always been discreet, but he looked uneasy when he mentioned Bianca. "She's a consultant from Milan," he stammered during a hurried phone call with Amelia. "Ethan brought her on to work on some European real estate expansions." "Is that all?" Amelia asked, sensing Michael's reluctance to elaborate. "Yeah, sure," Michael replied, but his hesitance spoke volumes. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became increasingly scarce at home. He mentioned that Bianca was brilliant, a rising star with a keen eye for international markets. Amelia tried to be supportive. After all, it wasn't strange for a business tycoon to hire foreign experts. Still, there was something about the name that pricked at her heart. One evening, Amelia decided to drop by Harrington Enterprises headquarters to bring Ethan a late dinner. She reasoned that it would be a small gesture to show that she cared about his grueling work schedule. She stepped off the private elevator and was greeted by hushed voices in an adjacent conference room. Through the glass partition, she saw a woman with glossy raven hair, a striking silhouette and impeccable fashion sense. Bianca Rossi. She stood too close to Ethan. A manicured hand casually resting on his shoulder as they laughed over something on his laptop screen. Amelia swallowed hard. She chided herself for jumping to conclusions. Surely it was just a collaborative moment between colleagues. But the images stuck with her as she handed Ethan the neatly wrapped dinner in his office. He barely acknowledged her gesture. He was polite but distant, scanning his phone for messages, even as she explained she'd made his favorite dish. A week later, paparazzi photos surfaced on a gossip blog, Ethan and Bianca stepping out of a swanky midtown lounge after midnight. Their heads were bent together conspiratorially. Headlines speculated about the nature of their relationship, fueling rumors that the Ice King of Manhattan might be melting for someone who wasn't his wife. Amelia's heart pounded as she scrolled through the images. She tried calling Ethan to confront him, but he didn't pick up, responding instead with a terse text. "I'm in a meeting. We'll talk later." When he finally came home, almost 2 days later, Amelia pressed him about the gossip. Ethan's voice was defensive, but not remorseful. "Bianca's an important asset to the company. Yes, we occasionally meet after hours to discuss deals. That lounge was hosting a networking event. It's purely business." He slammed a stack of paperwork onto a table. "Why are you listening to rumors?" She tried to protest that the photos were more than rumors. "People don't usually lean that close for purely professional reasons," she said, her voice trembling. But Ethan dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. He glowered at her as though she were a child, complaining about boogeymen under the bed. Hurt and frustrated, Amelia retreated to her writing alcove, tears burning her eyes. That night, sleep eluded her. She rummaged through the kitchen for comfort food, but found none, as though the entire house was devoid of warmth. She found herself turning to old letters Ethan had written early in their marriage, beautifully poetic messages about how he'd cross oceans just to see her smile. She wondered how that sweet man had turned into this cold figure. Yet she refused to lose hope. She was pregnant with their child. She wanted to believe they could salvage their relationship. But in the days that followed, Ethan's mood only darkened and Bianca's presence grew more visible. Public events industry gatherings, even front-page spreads in business magazines. Bianca was always by Ethan's side, impeccably dressed, elegant and fiercely confident. The gossip lines began referring to Bianca as Ethan Harrington's secret weapon. Amelia felt increasingly like a spectre in her own marriage. Her parents urged her to consider a separation, but Amelia couldn't fathom raising her unborn child alone. She told herself, "I vowed to stand by him in sickness and in health." Maybe this is the sickness part, a sickness of the heart. She resolved to give him one more chance to come clean, to choose his family over his ambition. Little did she know, the confrontation that awaited her would leave her homeless, destitute, and questioning whether she ever truly knew the man she married. Amelia's breaking point came on a balmy summer evening. She had reached her 6th month of pregnancy, her belly now unmistakably round. She still tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, attending prenatal checkups, reading baby books, and preparing the penthouse for the child she still prayed Ethan would embrace. One night she decided to confront him directly, face to face, without anger or accusations. She wanted them to speak candidly, to air out the tension and begin rebuilding. She planned a simple dinner, lighting fragrant candles reminiscent of their early romance. At first, Ethan didn't come home at his usual time, so she texted him, "We need to talk. Please come back soon." To her relief, Ethan arrived, but he wasn't alone. Bianca Rossi strode in behind him, her heels clacking against the polished floor. The moment Amelia saw her stepping into the penthouse, their home, her heart dropped. "What is she doing here?" Amelia asked, her voice unsteady. Ethan dismissed her concern with an airy gesture. "We have business to finalize. Her hotel was overbooked, so I said she could stay in the guest room." Anger flared in Amelia's chest like a volcanic eruption. "And you thought it was appropriate to bring her here without even telling me first. This is our home, Ethan." Bianca flicked her eyes around the apartment, obviously appraising the decor, the furniture, the artwork. In that moment, Amelia felt like a stranger in her own life. Ethan sighed. "Amelia, we're busy. I'm not going to pay for a suite last minute when we have space here." Fury mingled with sorrow. The carefully prepared dinner sat on the table, the candles flickering ominously. With trembling hands, Amelia threw her napkin onto her plate, spattering sauce across the white tablecloth. "You claim it's all business, but do you have any idea what this looks like? The rumors, the pictures, the way you've been ignoring me." Bianca cleared her throat, stepping closer to Ethan as though to defend him. Amelia felt an invisible line being crossed. "Mrs. Harrington," Bianca said smoothly, "Ethan and I respect you, but we're professionals and we stop." Amelia cut her off. "I'm talking to my husband. You stay out of this." For the first time, a flicker of guilt passed across Ethan's face. But it was fleeting. His brow hardened. "You're overreacting. Bianca is an integral part of my European expansion. Don't embarrass us by being insecure." His words sliced through Amelia's hope like a blade. Amelia stared at him, tears threatening to overflow. "I'm 6 months pregnant, Ethan. You're never here. You dismiss me every time I mention our future. And now, you bring her into our home. I'm not being insecure. I'm being realistic about what's happening right before my eyes." Ethan's expression turned glacial. "Then maybe you need to leave if you can't handle how I run my business." "Are you throwing me out of my own home?" Amelia asked, incredulity sharpening her voice. "It's my property," Ethan snapped. "All of it is in my name. If you're going to cause a scene, maybe you should go cool off somewhere else." The shock nearly stole Amelia's breath. This was a man she had trusted with her life. Feeling her heart hammering, she grabbed a small duffel bag from the closet and began stuffing it with essentials. Her tears came in hot, humiliating waves, but she refused to let them see her crumble completely. She paused by the door, turning back to Ethan one last time. "I'm pregnant with your child," she whispered. "Does that mean anything to you?" He offered only stony silence. Bianca folded her arms, her eyes assessing Amelia with detached curiosity. It was as if Amelia was an inconvenience in her own marriage. Without another word, Amelia left the burn of betrayal scorching her every step. That night she drove aimlessly through the city, unsure of where to go. She tried calling friends, but it was late. Most were asleep or didn't pick up. In her desperation, she found an empty parking lot near a 24-hour diner. She reclined the driver's seat and surrendered to tears. The penthouse in the clouds now felt like a distant dream. There in the cramped car, she was alone, displaced, pregnant, and terrified of what lay ahead. The first night in the car was the hardest. Amelia cried until her eyes were raw, the baby kicking restlessly within her. At sunrise, she awakened to the sounds of passing trucks and the lingering smell of grease from the diner's kitchen. She realized she had no plan, very little cash, and only a tank half full of gas. Her immediate thought was to reach out to her parents. But George and Laura Johnson were retired and lived on a modest pension in Florida. They had warned her about Ethan. She felt too proud, too ashamed to call them. Instead, she resolved to figure things out on her own. With her phone battery waning, she scrolled through her contacts and called Elizabeth Chamberlain, an old friend from college who lived across the river in Brooklyn. "Elizabeth first. I don't know where else to go," she confessed, trying to steady her voice. Elizabeth, hearing the distress in Amelia's tone, immediately offered her spare couch. Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Yet she hesitated. Elizabeth lived in a one-bedroom apartment with her partner, and Amelia didn't want to impose for too long, especially pregnant. Still, it was better than sleeping in a car. They agreed to meet later that day. For now, Amelia took what little money she had and went into the diner to buy a cheap breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. Her reflection in the napkin dispenser startled her pale cheeks, red eyes, and hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. In that moment, she felt utterly broken. But she also felt a surge of determination for the sake of her unborn child. She had to be strong. She spent a few nights on Elizabeth's couch. She tried texting Ethan, not out of desperation for him, but in concern for the baby's future. No response. She called Harrington Enterprises, but the receptionist politely informed her that Mr. Harrington was unavailable. Through some social media posts, she discovered Ethan had flown to Europe. Photos showed him and Bianca at a business conference in Paris, the two of them smiling brightly for the cameras. The knife twisted deeper into her heart. Amelia decided to see an attorney, Frederick Johnson, who specialized in family law. A friend of Elizabeth's recommended him. In a small, dimly lit office, she poured out her story from the sudden eviction to the pregnancy. Frederick listened sympathetically. "He can't just throw you out like that," Frederick said firmly. "Legally, you have marital rights. And given your pregnancy, the court will strongly favor your interests if you pursue spousal support." Yet Amelia feared the cost of a prolonged legal battle. Ethan's wealth gave him power and influence. She had only a few dollars left in her personal bank account. Frederick understood her predicament. "We can file an emergency petition for support, but you'll need some upfront funds to cover initial filing fees and attorney's fees." Overwhelmed, Amelia left the office feeling trapped. She was sleeping on a friend's couch, jobless and pregnant. She had no illusions that Ethan, who was flaunting Bianca publicly, would suddenly capitulate to a legal demand. She also feared the emotional toll a public battle would take on her. Instead, she decided to try one more approach meeting with Ethan's father, Christopher Harrington. Christopher was once a towering figure in Ethan's life, a strong-willed man who believed in family above all else. Amelia hoped that if she told him what had happened, he might intervene. She dialed Christopher's private number and left a voicemail explaining the situation in as calm a tone as she could manage. A week passed. No return call. During that time, Elizabeth's small apartment was becoming crowded, and Amelia sensed she was overstaying her welcome. Elizabeth never said so, but Amelia felt guilty. So one chilly morning she returned to the only other shelter she had, her car. She gathered blankets and pillows, then parked near a safe residential area. People walking their dogs occasionally threw curious glances, but no one bothered her. Despite the heartbreak, she clung to the child growing inside her. She would talk to the baby, whispering promises that she would find a way to create a safe, loving environment. Every day felt like an uphill battle. She scoured job listings, applied to freelance writing gigs online, and visited second-hand stores looking for cheap baby items. The fact that she had to consider living in a car while pregnant was a reality that struck her with devastating clarity. Little did she know that a lifeline, an unexpected letter, was already in transit, a ticking time bomb that would shift the power dynamic in ways no one could have predicted. 2 weeks had passed since Amelia moved back into her car. The nights were growing colder, and her pregnancy was entering the 3rd trimester. Every time the baby shifted inside her, it brought a surge of maternal protectiveness. She refused to believe that this was the life she and her child deserved, a mother sleeping in a cramped vehicle while the father was gallivanting across Europe with another woman. Then, on a drizzly afternoon, Amelia received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. Tentatively, she answered. It was a law firm in Manhattan. "Ms. Harrington, this is Megan Reyes from Parker & White. We have a document addressed to you from Christopher Harrington, delivered via courier. May I confirm a mailing address?" Amelia's pulse quickened. She had to scramble for a place where she could reliably receive mail. She decided on Elizabeth's address. The woman on the phone asked her to come in person if possible, since the document was marked as urgent. With a jolt of renewed energy, Amelia agreed. The next day she dressed in her cleanest clothes, an old maternity dress that still fit, and took a train into Manhattan. Despite her precarious situation, stepping back into the bustling city felt like stepping onto a stage she used to dominate, if only in the glow of her husband's success. At the law firm's reception, a neatly dressed paralegal handed her a thick, sealed envelope. "Mr. Christopher Harrington requested we give this to you. Our understanding is that it's quite important. If you have any questions after reading it, don't hesitate to contact our office. Heart pounding. Amelia thanked her and retreated to a nearby cafe. She ordered a small tea and sat in a corner booth, carefully tearing open the envelope. Inside, she found several pages, a letter handwritten by Christopher Harrington, and attached to it a formal legal document. She scanned the letter first. Dearest Amelia, I've learned of your unfortunate circumstances. Ethan has dishonored our family and his obligations to you. I want you to know I was unaware of his actions until recently. I'm deeply sorry. I always considered you a daughter to me. Before his passing, my father, Patrick Harrington, established a trust meant to safeguard the future of any legitimate heirs in our family. I have added an addendum to this trust, legally guaranteeing specific rights to you and your child. Ethan may believe everything is in his name, but our family's estate carries weight beyond his personal empire. Enclosed you will find the official documents. Please do not hesitate to use them. I have already instructed my attorneys to stand by you if you decide to act on your rights. Ethan may have built his fortune, but he has no power to override this trust set in place by his grandfather. Yours sincerely, Christopher Harrington. Amelia's eyes widened in disbelief. She flipped to the legal documents which detailed how the Harrington family trust was structured. It specified that any grandchild of Patrick Harrington, Ethan included, would need to abide by certain moral stipulations to retain control of the estate. In the event of marital disputes, if a child was on the way, the spouse here, Amelia, could assert a claim to the trust's disbursements to ensure the well-being of the heir. Christopher had made an additional clause, naming Amelia as a beneficiary, directly ensuring that if Ethan violated the terms of their marriage, Amelia would have a powerful claim. Her hands trembled. Suddenly, a surge of conflicting emotions welled inside her relief. Gratitude, but also anger. Anger that Ethan had left her destitute, possibly assuming his power was absolute, when in reality his father had the foresight to protect Amelia's future. She reread the letter multiple times, tears forming in her eyes. This was the lifeline she desperately needed. But she also realized the magnitude of the decision before her. Using this trust would ignite a legal firestorm. Ethan would see it as a direct challenge to his empire. She recalled Frederick Johnson's warning about the cost of legal battles. Perhaps with Christopher's backing, she wouldn't be alone. She carefully tucked the documents into her bag, her mind swirling with possibilities. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. She saw a path to regaining her dignity, ensuring her child would never again be forced to sleep in a car. Yet she couldn't shake the nervous anticipation. Facing Ethan would require more than just legal documents. She would need the emotional fortitude to stand up to a man she once adored, a man who still had the power to break her heart with just one look. But for the sake of her unborn child, she vowed to do whatever it took. Armed with Christopher's letter and the legal documents, Amelia arranged an urgent meeting with Frederick Johnson. She felt a surge of empowerment, stepping into his office, a far cry from her previous visit, when despair weighed her down. Frederick's eyes widened as he flipped through the paperwork. This trust is solid ironclad, really. Patrick Harrington set it up decades ago to protect future generations. Christopher's addendum seals the deal for you. You can legally claim spousal support, living expenses, and even a portion of the family estate. If Ethan contests this in court, he'll face an uphill battle. Amelia felt tears of relief. So you're saying he can't just ignore me? Frederick nodded. Exactly. And based on the terms, if Ethan doesn't comply, He risks forfeiting a significant chunk of his inheritance and future claims. That's the last thing he wants. With newfound determination, Amelia gave Frederick the green light to file a formal claim. She couldn't return to living in her car, especially with her due date inching closer. Frederick drafted a letter to Ethan and Harrington Enterprises, a copy to Christopher Harrington, and an additional filing for the family court. The gist was clear. Amelia sought immediate financial support and housing in line with the Harrington Trust. News traveled quickly through the corporate grapevine. Within days, Ethan called. Amelia's heart pounded when she saw his name flash on her phone. She let it ring a few times, steadying her nerves before finally picking up. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Ethan growled. "Defending myself and our child," Amelia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She clutched the phone tightly. "You had no right to drag my father into this. I didn't drag him into anything. He reached out to me, Ethan. He knows what you did, and he's not going to let you ruin me or your child." Silence crackled over the line, thick with tension. "This is a private matter. You want to bankrupt me with lawyers. Fine. But don't forget, I have more resources than you can fathom." Amelia mustered a courage she'd never felt before. "I don't want your money, Ethan. I want security for our baby and a roof over my head. You left me with no other choice." She hung up before he could respond. Emotion flooded her, but she felt a sense of triumph for standing up to him. Frederick assured her that legally, Ethan would have little room to maneuver. If he tried to intimidate her or withhold financial assistance, the courts would rule in her favor. Days later, she got a surprising phone call from Christopher himself. "Amelia, my dear, I'm so sorry for everything you've endured," he said in a weary voice. He offered her a place in his countryside estate, but she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to live under the same roof as the Harrington patriarch, even if he was supportive. However, Christopher insisted it was large enough to offer privacy and comfort. "Think of it as a temporary solution until the legalities are sorted," he suggested. Reluctantly, Amelia agreed. Within a week, she was on a train, heading to the Harrington countryside estate, a sprawling mansion set amidst rolling green hills. The estate's caretaker, Edward Carlyle, greeted her warmly and showed her to a cozy suite. It felt surreal to step into such luxury after weeks sleeping in a car and crashing on couches. She was grateful, but her nerves jangled at the idea of crossing paths with Ethan. Christopher was there, looking older than Amelia remembered, his hair thinning and shoulders stooped. He embraced her, gently, tears in his eyes. "I never wanted this, dear. Ethan's lost his way. You have my full support." Yet every corner of the mansion reminded Amelia of the Harrington name of the man she once believed was her forever. The nights were restless, haunted by memories of their early romance. She tried focusing on the future, on the baby, on the glimmer of justice the documents promised. Soon enough, Ethan would have to face reality. The trust demanded it, and so did she. Little did Amelia know, Ethan and Bianca were already concocting a plan to deflect her legal claims to preserve their own interests in the Harrington Empire. The battle lines were drawn, and the stage was set for a confrontation that could fracture the Harrington legacy once and for all. Amelia's first morning at the Harrington countryside estate was a mixture of eerie calm and underlying tension. She awakened to bird song drifting through the open windows and a gentle knock at the door from one of the estate's housekeepers who brought breakfast on a silver tray. Just weeks ago, Amelia had been scrounging for cheap diner meals and dozing fitfully in her sedan. Now she was surrounded by luxury and worry, in equal measure. Christopher was nowhere to be seen at breakfast. The caretaker, Edward Carlyle, explained that Christopher had early business to attend to in town. Amelia tried to stay busy, exploring the vast gardens, writing in her journal, and crocheting small baby booties. She told herself this was temporary, that the estate was merely a haven until her legal situation was stable. Late that afternoon, a black SUV barreled up the gravel driveway, stirring dust into the air. Amelia watched from her bedroom window, her heart lurching when Ethan stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. Beside him was Bianca, clad in designer sunglasses. Even from a distance, Amelia felt the sharp sting of betrayal. A short while later, a housekeeper approached Amelia. "Mr. Harrington would like to speak with you in the drawing room." "Which Mr. Harrington?" Amelia asked, apprehension knotting her stomach. The housekeeper paused, uncertain. "Both, ma'am." The drawing room was an elegant space lined with antique bookshelves and accented by gilded mouldings. Christopher sat in a high-backed chair, his expression somber. Ethan stood behind him, posture rigid, eyes narrowed while Bianca hovered near the doorway, arms crossed defiantly. Christopher rose, offering Amelia a paternal nod. "Amelia, please have a seat. We need to discuss the situation." She settled on a velvet couch opposite them, carefully resting a protective hand over her belly. Ethan cut in before Christopher could speak. "You're leveraging my family's trust against me," he said, voice clipped. "It's manipulative, unnecessary. We could have handled this quietly." Amelia's cheeks burned. "You left me homeless," she said, with as much calm as she could muster. "Don't lecture me about being manipulative." Bianca cleared her throat, stepping forward. "Ethan never intended to make you homeless. It was your decision to leave." Heat flared in Amelia's chest. "Decision. I was practically told to get out." "You moved in behind me." Christopher held up a hand for silence. "Enough. This feud has gone too far. Amelia, you have every right to invoke the trust, and Ethan, I won't allow you to disregard it. Your grandfather set those conditions for a reason." Ethan sneered, turning his gaze to his father. "What about my own rights, father? My marriage is over. Let's be honest. Amelia's making claims for money she doesn't deserve." At that, Christopher's eyes flared with a rare anger. "Don't you dare speak of her that way. She's carrying your child. That child is a Harrington heir, and I will not see my grandchild born into poverty because of your recklessness." A tense silence ensued. Amelia felt her pulse pounding. She'd never expected Christopher to rise so strongly to her defense. She had no illusions that Ethan would suddenly repent. But this was a start. Bianca stepped toward Christopher. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, Ethan has legitimate business concerns. You can't force him to pour his personal assets into a failed marriage." Christopher's gaze was icy. "My father's trust trumps any personal preference. If Ethan fails to comply, the trust reverts significant assets to Amelia and the child. I suggest you both think very carefully before continuing this course." Ethan's nostrils flared. He seemed torn between anger and disbelief. Finally, he growled, "What do you want?" "Amelia. A lavish apartment. Monthly support. Name your price." Amelia swallowed, her voice shaky but resolute. "I don't want a quick payout. I want stability for our child. I want you to fulfill your responsibilities as a father." Bianca snorted. "This is just a money grab." Christopher shot her a glare. "You are a consultant, Miss Rossi. This is a family matter. I advise you to remain silent unless spoken to." The tension in the room escalated to a palpable heat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Christopher turned to Amelia. "I have some ideas on how to proceed that protect you and the baby. Let's discuss them privately. Ethan, Ms. Rossi. I believe you have other matters to attend to." Ethan looked like he wanted to protest, but Christopher's unyielding stare left no room for argument. Muttering under his breath, Ethan exited, Bianca trailing behind. As they left, Ethan glanced back at Amelia, a complex blend of anger and regret flickering in his eyes. But the moment was fleeting. And so, with Ethan's father by her side, Amelia found herself on the brink of reclaiming her life. The question now was how far Ethan would go to resist the trust's stipulations, and whether she could endure the next phase of this battle without losing herself in the process. Over the next several days, Christopher arranged for Amelia to meet with top financial advisors and attorneys who specialized in family trusts. The Harrington estate felt like a fortress in the midst of a brewing storm, and Amelia found an unexpected ally in the patriarch who once seemed remote and intimidating. Meanwhile, Ethan and Bianca confined themselves to a wing of the estate typically reserved for guests. Gossip buzzed among the household staff about the tension between father and son. Some whispered that Bianca was urging Ethan to contest the trust or find a loophole that would invalidate Amelia's claim. Others said Ethan had grown suspiciously quiet, possibly realizing just how much he stood to lose. In one particularly frank conversation, Christopher revealed the backstory of the trust. "My father, Patrick, witnessed many tragedies in his life. Siblings who fought over money, relatives who ignored their responsibilities. He wanted to ensure that any future Harrington would never suffer due to greed. That's why he made the trust so ironclad." Christopher sighed. Ethan used to understand this. When he was younger, he was driven, yes, but also kind. I don't know when he lost that compassion. Amelia listened, tears forming in her eyes. She thought back to the early days in the penthouse, to the man who wrote her love notes and made her feel cherished. Maybe he can still find it. She offered weakly, though she wasn't sure she believed her own words. At night, she lay awake in the grand four-poster bed, baby shifting inside her, reminding her of the stakes. Part of her wanted to run away from the entire toxic situation and never look back. But she had to secure her child's future, and the trust gave her the leverage to do so. On the fifth evening, a discreet knock came at her door. To her surprise, it was Ethan alone, looking disheveled. His usual polished facade had cracks. Dark circles lined his eyes. For a moment, Amelia flashed back to the old Ethan, the one who used to earnestly share his dreams with her. "May I come in?" he asked softly. She hesitated, but stepped aside. He entered, glancing around the room. "Could we talk?" His tone was unexpectedly calm, disarming her. Amelia led him to a small sitting area. She perched on the edge of a brocade chair, while Ethan hovered awkwardly. She braced herself for manipulation or anger, but what she saw in his eyes was something different. Regret, maybe even shame. "I never wanted to hurt you," he began, voice barely above a whisper. Things got out of hand. The business deals, the travel, the pressure, it was overwhelming. And Bianca, she made me feel powerful in a way I haven't felt in a long time. Amelia clenched her jaw. "Powerful enough to throw your pregnant wife out onto the street." He winced. I regret that. I was angry and I lashed out. It was cruel. And now, with the trust, I realize what I stand to lose. This estate, my entire inheritance, my reputation. It's all at risk. She studied him, noting the order of his words. Estate inheritance, reputation only. Then after all that, did he mention the personal cost? Is that your only concern? Your money? His eyes flickered. No, I'm here because I'm worried about you, about our child. Let's reach an understanding. I can't deal with the stress of a legal battle right now. Let's come to terms, settle this quietly. Amelia felt a surge of disappointment. So it was about a deal, not a genuine apology or reconciliation. And what would your terms be, Ethan? Look, I'll buy you a comfortable house, set up a generous trust for the child's education, and provide monthly support. In return, you drop any claims on the Harrington family trust. We'll settle everything out of court. His tone was calm, as though discussing a business merger. She inhaled sharply, her hand curling protectively around her belly. You want me to sign away my legal rights? The rights Christopher and your grandfather wanted me to have, so you can be free to do whatever you want. Ethan met her gaze, but remained silent, his eyes pleading. He reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over her heartbreak, anger, nostalgia for what they once shared. Quietly, Amelia stood. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not a business deal. You can't buy our child's security just to protect your empire." Ethan lingered for a moment, eyes searching hers. She wondered if he'd say something heartfelt, something that might spark hope. But he merely nodded, jaw clenched, and retreated from the room, leaving Amelia alone once more in the hushed corridors of the Harrington estate. When she finally sank back onto the bed, tears brimmed in her eyes. She realized the man she'd married was truly gone. All that remained was a millionaire, desperate to salvage his ego and empire. And yet, despite the pain, Amelia felt a steady resolve. She would not betray the trust Christopher had shown her, nor would she abandon her child's rightful claim. The final showdown was inevitable. The morning after Ethan's late-night visit, a storm brewed in the early dawn sky. Thunder rumbled across the estate's rolling hills, a fitting backdrop to the mounting tensions inside. Bianca wasted no time seizing an opportunity to confront Amelia. She cornered her near the estate's library, where Amelia was paging through a parenting guide. "You're using this baby as leverage." Bianca spat, her accent sharpening her words. "It's disgusting." Amelia glanced up, calm despite the fury surging in her. "You have no idea what I've gone through. Don't pretend you're innocent. You helped push me out of my own home." Bianca smirked. "Ethan would have left you eventually. You're not on his level. You never were. This baby is just your golden ticket, isn't it?" Those words struck a nerve. For a moment, Amelia considered unleashing all her anger, but she remembered Christopher's advice to keep her composure. She took a measured breath. "If I wanted gold, I could have stayed in the penthouse pretending everything was fine. But I won't let your greed or Ethan's pride jeopardize my child's future." Bianca bristled, but before she could retort, Christopher's voice echoed from the hallway. "Bianca, a word!" He stood in the doorway, arms folded. With one last glare at Amelia, Bianca clicked her heels out of the library, trailing after Christopher. Amelia closed the parenting guide, her heart hammering. She felt an odd sense of gratitude that Christopher had intervened, even if it wouldn't end Bianca's hostility. That afternoon, the storm finally broke, rain lashing the estate. Amelia sat by a large window, watching lightning fork across the sky. She wondered how she'd ended up here, once deeply in love, now locked in a legal and emotional battle. She whispered a silent prayer for the baby's well-being, determined to keep the child safe no matter what came next. By evening, Frederick Johnson arrived braving the storm to deliver urgent legal papers. "We have confirmation that Ethan's attorneys are preparing a countersuit," he told Amelia as they sat in a study. "They're claiming you abandoned the marital home willingly, and that any request for trust disbursements is an overreach. They also aim to question the paternity of the child." Amelia's stomach churned. Paternity. Ethan knows this is his baby. Frederick sighed. They're using it as leverage. If they can stall the proceedings, they might pressure you into an unfavorable settlement. Tears of rage blurred Amelia's vision. "This is insane. They're willing to smear me like that." Frederick nodded solemnly. "Yes. But don't worry. We'll counter their claims with medical records, witness statements, whatever it takes. You have Christopher and the trust documents on your side." After Frederick left, Amelia paced her sweet adrenaline roaring in her veins. She couldn't fathom how the sweet man she'd married had devolved into someone who would question her integrity and the paternity of their child. The betrayal felt even sharper than the day he'd thrown her out. It was during this restless night that Christopher knocked on her door. The older man looked weary. "May I come in?" She nodded, stepping aside. He sank into an armchair, pressing a hand to his temple. "I'm sorry for the legal circus. I've tried speaking sense to Ethan, but Bianca's influence runs deep. She's convinced him that you're out to destroy him, which is absurd." Amelia's voice wobbled. "He's out to destroy me, Christopher. They're disputing the baby's paternity." "How could he do that?" Christopher's expression darkened. "That's Bianca's handiwork. I know my son isn't heartless enough to deny his own child. I'll do everything I can to intervene. We must stay strong." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Christopher's tired features. In that moment, Amelia realized he carried a burden almost as heavy as her own, watching his son destroy not only his marriage, but his morality in pursuit of superficial power. She felt a surge of empathy for this man, who was once so proud of Ethan's achievements. As the thunder boomed, Christopher rose and placed a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. "Have faith, dear. Sometimes, even in the darkest storm, the light finds a way through." He bid her good night. Amelia sat by the window for a long time afterward, her mind swirling with memories both sweet and bitter. She knew the real battle was just beginning, but she also knew she no longer faced it alone. A final reckoning awaited them all. And in that reckoning, a single letter, Christopher's letter, supported by the ironclad trust, might be the key to destroying the illusions Ethan and Bianca had so carefully built. A week later, the long-anticipated court hearing convened in a stately Manhattan courthouse. Rain still slicked the city streets, as though the storm from the estate had followed them. The hearing was preliminary, designed to establish immediate financial support for Amelia and clarify the trust's role. Amelia arrived with Frederick Johnson by her side. She wore a simple black dress that clung to her pregnant belly, a visual reminder of what was truly at stake. Across the aisle, Ethan sat with his high-powered legal team. Bianca perched behind them, her face a mask of cold confidence. The judge, an older woman named Eleanor Pierce, called the session to order. Frederick presented the Harrington Trust documents along with Christopher's addendum. He explained Amelia's circumstances, her forced eviction, her pregnancy, and her need for security. Then came Ethan's turn. His attorneys tried to paint Amelia as a gold digger who refused mediation. They even hinted that the baby might not be Ethan's. Amelia felt her blood boil at the suggestion, but she steeled herself, trusting Frederick to counter. It was Christopher's testimony that proved decisive. When the judge invited him to speak, he rose clear-eyed despite his evident exhaustion. My father established this trust to ensure no legitimate heir to the Harrington name would suffer due to negligence or greed, Christopher said firmly. Amelia is my daughter-in-law. She's carrying my grandchild. I've personally witnessed Ethan's recent behavior and can testify that Amelia has been unjustly cast aside. The trust is clear. If Ethan fails to care for his spouse and child, the estate can and will intervene. Ethan's lead attorney shifted uncomfortably, but Bianca visibly bristled. Amelia watched Ethan for any sign of remorse. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, refusing to meet her gaze. Judge Pierce asked pointed questions, but Harrington, you've heard your father's statement. Are you prepared to contest the validity of your own grandfather's trust? Ethan stood buttoning his suit jacket. I respect my family's legacy. Your Honor, however, there have been misunderstandings. My wife left the marital home of her own accord, and Judge Pierce raised an eyebrow. According to the affidavits, you told her to leave if she couldn't accept your new living arrangements. So is it correct to say that she wasn't merely leaving of her own free will, but acting on your demands? Ethan faltered. Yes, but it wasn't meant to be permanent. The judge's eyes narrowed. That's not how it appears. Nor does the rumor you're questioning the paternity of this child. It seems you're pulling every trick to avoid your responsibilities. Bianca looked like she wanted to speak, but Ethan's attorney motioned for her to remain silent. At that moment, Amelia felt an odd sense of pity for Ethan. He was cornered, forced to defend indefensible actions, all because he refused to let go of his pride. After reviewing the evidence and arguments, Judge Pierce ruled for an immediate support order. Ethan was mandated to provide Amelia with a monthly stipend and secure housing if Amelia wished to live outside the Harrington estate. The paternity matter was dismissed as a baseless claim subject to a simple test if needed. The judge also recognized Christopher's right to enforce the trust, signaling that a more expansive financial arrangement could follow if Ethan didn't comply. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over Amelia. She had won the first battle. The court had acknowledged the validity of the trust and her right to support. Ethan stormed out, flanked by his attorneys, while Bianca sent Amelia a venomous look before trailing after him. Christopher approached, gently touching Amelia's shoulder. That went as well as it could have. She nodded, tears forming. I'm just glad the court saw the truth. Despite this small victory, Amelia knew the war was not over. Ethan's empire was vast, and so was his pride. But the single letter from Christopher, the trust documents, and her unwavering determination had shattered the impenetrable facade of the millionaire who thought he was untouchable. Now she had a chance to build a life for herself and her child, free from the nightmares of sleeping in a car and from the tyranny of a love grown toxic. And so in the grand showdown that pitted true family values against reckless ambition, it was a single letter, backed by an ironclad trust, that brought the mighty crashing down. Amelia stood firm, protecting her unborn child and claiming the security and dignity she deserved. Ethan, blinded by his own success, nearly lost everything in his quest for power and validation. Yet in the end, justice prevailed. Thank you for watching this dramatic saga unfold from the car, where Amelia first sheltered her unborn baby, to the gilded halls of a family estate where one letter rewrote her fate.